Jesus and you both have your hands on the wheel. It's not just Jesus take the wheel. The divine paradox is this. When it comes to sanctification, it is all of God and all of us. God is working in us to work for his good pleasure. But not only does this text tell us that God is working and we are to be working in obedience to God, it also tells us how we are to be obedient. And this is the third point. He says we need to be content. It says, do all things without grumbling or disputing, so that you will prove yourselves to be blameless and innocent children of God, above reproach, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you appear as lights in the world. There's a story about a pilot who always looked down intently on a certain valley in the Appalachians when the plane passed overhead. One day, his co-pilot asked, "What's so interesting about that spot?" The pilot replied, "You see that stream? Well, when I was a kid, I used to sit down there on a log and fish. Every time an airplane flew over, I would look up and I would wish I were flying. Now I look down and I wish I was fishing." It is always tempting to think that others have it better than we do. And that if we just had a little more, everything would be fine. But contentment cannot be achieved through increasing possessions. It just can't. Trust me, I promise you, I'm a witness of that. Nothing will ever be enough. Nothing will ever be enough. But Paul says, do all things without grumbling or disputing, because it's important. John MacArthur, when he preached on this text, he took his church down the path of complaining in human history. It says the first human to be discontent was Adam and Eve, we know this, but it's Adam who we actually have his discontentment recorded. He said, "God, the woman you gave me." We are in this mess because of the woman. He didn't blame Eve. He actually blamed God. He's discontent with God, with the woman that God given him, even though he had just sang a song about how beautiful she was. Cain complained to God about God's work in his life. Moses complained to God for not doing what he wanted him to do when he wanted him to do it. Aaron and Miriam complained to God against Moses, his chosen leader, and their own brothers in Numbers chapter 12. It actually starts in Numbers chapter 11. Jonah complained to God because he was mad at God for saving the Ninevites. Jonah chapter 4. And then John MacArthur says this, "It is still a popular pastime to complain about God." And we all complain about God. Now you may be saying, I don't make any accusations about God. I love God. I love what he's doing in my life. But whenever you complain, you are complaining against God. Being a complainer means you aren't happy with God. You are saying to God, why did you make me this way? Why did you give me this body? Why did you move me to this town? Why did you put me in this church? And in Romans 9:20, it says, "Who are you, O man, who answers back to God? The thing molded will not say to the molder, why did you make me like this? Will it?" Well, the answer to that is yes. We always do that. We are always discontent with what God has given us. And the worst part about this sin of grumbling or complaining is that it's contagious. It'll lead to disputing, as we see in our text. I'm amazed at how people can be totally fine, right? You can be totally fine in a situation, a house or a home or a church, and then someone can whisper in your ear, complain, and you're like, oh, I never really thought about that. Oh, you know what? I guess I'm a little discontent also myself now. Now I'm angry. And that just spreads around the church, and next thing you know, the pastor's fired. You know what I'm saying? That's just how it goes, Joe. That's just how it goes. It's not a joke. Actually, that happens. That's how simple it starts. It starts with one person, and it spreads. And this is what Paul says. We need to be blameless children of God. And what Paul is drawing from this text is he's drawing from the history of Israel. And we know this because he says in our text here that we are in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. This is the same thing that we hear about Israel. The children of God in the Old Testament, they're saved from Egypt. And some of them still complain. And here's some of the things they were saying. They want to go back to Egypt. Because Egypt had cucumbers. You know, a place where they could die. Did you bring us out here to the desert so we could die, Moses? We could have died in Egypt. He's like, are you serious? God saved you from slavery. God was giving them manna and water. They continued to complain the entire time in the wilderness. So now let's get to the 40. They're complaining the whole time. Now we get to the end of the 40 years and they're still complaining. And here's what God says, Numbers 11:1. Now the people became like those who complain of adversity in the hearing of the Lord. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. God burned them and consumed them because he was so angry with their discontent. And here's what here's what Paul says about that verse. And here's the advice he gives to us in 1 Corinthians 10:6-11. He says, now these things happened as examples for us, so that we will not crave evil things as they also craved. Do not be idolaters, as some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drank and stood up to play. Verse 8, nor let us act immorally as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. Nor let us try the Lord as some of them did and were destroyed by the serpents. Nor, there's that word, grumble, complain, as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. God hates those who complain. It takes for granted his goodness, and it spreads like wildfire, especially in the church. So part of being a Christian is trusting in the wisdom of God. Could it be that God has given you all that you can handle? Too much could consume you. I was reading about an eagle in the sky who had his eye on a weasel on the ground. He's circling around the weasel, and finally he swoops down and he picks up the weasel. As he flew away, the weasel started to eat his chest and crack his bones until the eagle dropped. The eagle died and the weasel was free. That thing that you're lusting after will ruin you. It can ruin you. Trust God and be thankful.